Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. So, in this session, we'll discuss a much awaited session, the workshop on working with public datasets. The session structure is as follows. We'll start with probably not data collection, but how to collect data. Yeah. So we'll start with discussing about secondary sources, because that is what majorly public data is all about. We won't cover on-ground data collection or primary data sets. Within secondary sources, we'll discuss about what do we mean by data biography, understanding structured and unstructured data sources, and then since most public data is technically available as CSV files or PDF files or data from the web, so we will be discussing these three formats and how we can work with data which is available on all three formats. So starting with secondary data sources. So a lot of times researchers or citizens or people who would like to work with data, they are not able, they don't want to collect data themselves. Public data means that it's available at one place, it's accessible. Data is already collected by someone. So those are the kind of sources that we are referring to as secondary data sources. Working with secondary data sources though is not as straightforward. A lot of times data is not accessible. Data is created by someone and consumed by someone, so which means there can be some sort of a gap between what the user meant while they were collecting the data versus what the user who is using the data. There can be some gaps. If the data is collected and if it's not maintained, so maintaining data sets is hard and time consuming. So imagine if you're working with a census data set. Is it possible to just download the data set from the census website and start working on it? Most often it isn't. So you will have to process the file, clean the files, make sure that you understand all of the variables, and only then you start working. So those are some of the challenges you face when you work with secondary data. Now, what is a data biography? And this is in context, because we are discussing about secondary data, we will download and we will use a lot of public data, which means the data will come from everywhere. So a data biography just helps a team or an individual to just kind of have important information around a data set at one place, which can be shared by across a team, so it's like a directory of sorts, a directory of data, which we are calling it a data biography. So the kind of variables that we have here, so you have the data set name, the link, who collected the data, which is very important, who owns the data as well, how the data was collected, whether it was like an in-person survey or it was collected in a different way, the sample size, is it like a sample survey, who was excluded or included, or more like what was the sample definition, when was the data collected, and you can go on. This data biography, the format is not fixed. The intent is that everything about a data set should be available at one place. So let's say if as an organization you are working on a lot of data sets, so this can be a good resource to maintain. Yeah, structured versus unstructured. Now within secondary sources you have a lot of different type of data sets. These two are the most common, structured and unstructured. What do we mean by structured? So there is an inherent structure. So for example, if I'm working with an Excel file, I know that data will be stored in rows and columns and across variables and observations. If I'm working with a PDF, there is also some sort of a structure there. Unstructured data is usually documents, let's say a script from a movie, or let's say a judgment from a court case. So those are the kind of unstructured data sets. So there is an inherent structure which is present in structured data sets. Now we can't just ignore unstructured data just because it is not structured, though it's hard to work with, but then there are a lot of use cases. So we have cited a couple of use cases here. So a lot of time people use judgments from the Supreme Court or other court orders to do analysis. So all of that is possible even with unstructured data sets, and now we see with AI and ML a lot of unstructured data is getting used. So unstructured data is very important. So some of the examples of both these sources are for structured. Some common public data sets. We have the Census of India, the NCRB crime reports. We also have the All India PIN code. This is available on data.gov.in. I think one of the most downloaded data sets. So these are structured sources. Unstructured we'll have law and judgments, newspaper reports, ethnographic summaries, etc. Mostly in this talk or in this session, we will mostly be working with structured data. So let's start with CSV files. Now CSV stands for comma separated value, which as we all know is one of the most widely used data formats. We like, when we say machine readable, though it means a lot of data should be available across formats, but CSV is one of the most important formats, and we always believe that open data should be available in the CSV format. It offers a lot of flexibility for building tools, for research and analysis, but then there are a lot of challenges as well with CSVs. Now here in the small room, everyone will have a different way of creating a CSV file, so there isn't any standard way to how one should create a CSV file, which means that, let's say if I'm using a MacBook and if I'm using a Windows laptop or a Linux machine, I will create a CSV file in different ways, and those might not be work very smoothly across these different operating systems. So that is a challenge. CSVs are not meant for providing contextual information. Now what does this mean? Let's say if I have a variable age, which technically should be numeric, but in the CSV file there's no way for, let's say, a person who is using that CSV file that this column should be numeric or this column should be, let's say, non-numeric. So you don't store any such field, or it's like a quoted file. Everything is treated as a string. So there isn't any contextual information. Yeah. So just reading the code, and all the sources are cited in the slides, and the slides are also available. So please don't take any notes. So CSV is insufficient for tabular data on the web with independent generic viewers because it lacks this context. Not knowing which columns contain numeric data makes it impossible to sort. Not knowing which values are links makes it impossible to connect the data into the web. So basically there are challenges with CSV file, though they are very easy to work with. So what are some of the core principles that one should follow? Be consistent, and we will discuss these principles. Build a tidy dataset. We will also discuss what do we mean by a tidy dataset. Create a data dictionary, which is different from a data biography that we discussed. This is very important. No calculations in the raw data files, which means that if you have a file, and especially a CSV file, and if you write a formula, and if you again save it as a CSV file, your formula won't be saved because it does not save any of these contexts, so you should not do any calculations in the raw data file. Again, very important, you should not use any sort of formats or font colors or highlighting in the CSV file because these won't be saved. This is very important, which a lot of people avoid but should not. Using data validation to avoid errors, which basically means that if you have 5 columns and if you know that the first column should be an integer, the second column should be a string, the third column should be something else, so you can create these rules, and there are tools available where you can search, validate your files along these rules, and we will also discuss how we can do this. Use consistent codes for categorical variables, which basically means that if you have a gender column and if you have male female, so you should use male female across the file, and it should not be male female then M and F, so the code should be consistent. For missing values, it can be NA, it can be 0, it can be -99, but whatever it is, it should be consistent. Variable name should be consistent. And there's a very good doc here on how to have good variable names. and use a single format for all dates. So if there are 5 different variables with dates, all of them should follow the same format. It should not be like one of them is DD the other one is YYMMDD. Technically all of them should follow the same format. So let's moving on to what do we mean by a tidy dataset. So by the name itself, it means that something which is clean, something which is not very subjective. So what does it mean? Each variable forms a column. So let's say if I am collecting data for students, and if I have a variable age and weight, so age and weight are variables. Each observation forms a row, which basically means that if there are 5 students, then every row is for one student. So this is an observation for each student. And each type of observation unit forms a table, which means that if I take out of 5, if I take 2 rows, that is a table. Here if I take 1 row, that is a table in itself. Now let's try and understand this by an example. So let's say this is table 1. Now can someone tell me how many variables are there in this table? And you can use the mic if... Question is, how many variables are there in this table?
Two variables.
Which are these? Yes, so the slides are available at bit.ly/datadialogues/public data. I will say.
Treatment A and treatment B.
And what about the first column? Yes, so there are actually 2 variables. First column is not a variable, it is a label, it is a row label. And there are 2 variables in this dataset. Table 2, oh sorry. Yes, now how many variables are there? Going by the same logic, there are 3 variables. The first column, treatment A, treatment B, is not a variable, it is a label. Now let's see what a tidy version of this dataset. So if you see, both table 1 and table 2 represent the same thing. Alright, it's the same table, just a different way. So table 2 is the transpose of table 1. But now let's see what a tidy dataset is. This is again the same table, but now what you have is, you have, going by the definition, there are 2 variables, or maybe 3 variables if you treat result as also a variable. So you have person, treatment and result. Every observation is a row. Going by that logic, it's easy to, so what do we get? So let's say, how do we define what can be a row and what can be a column? So the logic here, or the thumb rule here, is if you have to compare something, then it should be a column, and if you have to kind of aggregate, then it can be a row. So which is what this says. A general rule of thumb is that it is easier to describe functional relationship between variables than between rows. So for example, if I say A into B equal to C, so A, B and C can be columns, and then your observation can be rows. And there's a very interesting paper on this tidy data by Mr. Hadley Beacon. Please refer to it to understand more in depth of what tidy data set is, because this will be used when you are processing data, creating new data sets from the public data. Quickly moving on to what is a data dictionary. So data dictionary basically means that whatever information you have in the data set, even if you don't open that data set, let's say if I have a 1 GB CSV file, and if I want to know what is in that data set, so a data dictionary will help me see what all variables are there. So these are a few examples of how a data dictionary looks like. So you have a variable, you have a name of the variable, you have the measurement unit. So data dictionary, so you have a variable name, measurement unit, allowed values. Now if you focus on allowed values, you see here, if it's a numeric, allowed values can be a range. If it's a date, also allowed value can be a range. categorical variables. If you are using certain categories, you can write it like what are these categories used for. And similar, there are no rules. The only rule is anyone who is working with this data without even looking at the data, they should know what the data is about, and if there are any gaps, let's say missing values, etc. So how you are dealing with that. So that is the logic of creating a data dictionary. The same thing is written here, what we just saw. No sorry. So there's this. If you remember the core principles, we are so be consistent, build a tidy dataset, create a data dictionary, and then we have no calculations in the raw data files. So this is very self-explanatory. If you are doing some analysis in Excel, you write a lot of formulas, and a lot of times when files are exported as CSVs, the formulas are not saved somewhere. So it's always better to have one source, which is the original source. You don't do any analysis on that, and then have a separate file to do all sort of analysis, so that the raw data set is always preserved. Don't use font color or highlighting. Now there's a very good example of this. So a lot of times we see something like this. So you have 3 columns: ID, date, and glucose levels, and you see in row number 5, maybe for some reason the whoever has created a data set has, they have formatted it so that it stands out, or maybe there's a meaning to this color but it's not clear, and whenever this gets saved as a CSV file, this information will be lost. So this an alternative can be creating another column, which is like, because here what you're doing is you're marking an outlier, so you create another column and then you mark it as true. So this preserves the file, preserves the information, and this is how you can be more consistent. Alright, so another important one, use data validation to avoid errors, and there are at least a couple of tools available, and both of them are open source tools, Good Tables and CSV Lint. So whenever you have a CSV file, and especially if you are downloading it either from a public source or let's say even from a private source, and before even opening the file, you can use these tools to check if the data structure is consistent, the header values are there, total number of missing values, and then you can have a discussion with the data creators using these results and kind of see, okay, this is what you are working for. So this really helps in making sure that whatever data you are working with is accurate and without any errors. So what are some of these common errors and warnings when you work with CSV file? Encoding is a big one, because a lot of times when files are exchanged between operating systems, you get these encoding issues. So encoding can be one, which is easily fixed, but these are just, we are listing down some of the errors. Line breaks also, because we are working across multiple systems. Every OS might use like a different line character for a line break, which can sometimes cause issues. Blank rows, sometimes the codes are missing, etc., etc. So there is a difference between an error and a warning, and a warning will still you will still be able to use the file. Let's say if it's a duplicate column name, so it isn't an error, but especially when you're validating the files, you will get both of these. You will get errors and you will get warnings, and then you can decide which ones to take care of and which ones you're fine with. So that is what you get when you use a validator. So we have listed a few resources here which you can use on learning to deal with CSV files, and these are really useful. Some of them are also videos, so alright. So now coming on to the another important format, which unfortunately a lot of public datasets are available in the form of PDF files. So how should we deal with PDF files, and what even is a PDF file? So usually when you create a file, you have a data and then you have content. So let's say, so there are 2 separate files. So the benefit of a PDF is everything is in one file. So the data, analysis, visualization, storytelling, everything can be one file. So which is, and then it will work across systems. Though PDF is not a open format. I think now it is. Earlier it wasn't. It was a proprietary format, but still PDF. If I open it on a MacBook, if I open it on a Windows laptop, PDF will work as it is. So that is the benefit you get. out of a PDF, and that is why a lot of reports, a lot of datasets are shared as PDF files. But then the challenge here is with so much of formatting, it's really, if PDF files are used for sharing data, it really gets hard to extract data out of those PDF files. So what can we do? So there are two types of PDFs, machine readable and non-machine readable. Non-machine readable, what we basically means that if I have like if it's a scanned document rather than something like an Excel file which is printed as a PDF, that will be a machine readable. But if I take a screenshot of that Excel file and then print it as a PDF, that will be a scanned PDF. So then there are tools, and you can extract data from both of these, though it is quite difficult to extract data from scanned PDFs, and also the accuracy is, you might have to check how accurate it is. So we will be discussing, especially from machine readable PDFs, what are some of the tools you can use. So there are a lot more, but these are a few common ones. So one is Tabula, one is Camelot. So let's, probably I can show you if Tabula is open. Yes, so I've already installed this, and again the sources are there on the slide. So let's say if I am working with a PDF, so this is a PDF, some random PDF for victim compensation. So I'll just open it here. And this is how it is. This is how it looks, and it's a machine readable PDF. Alright? So let's say if I have to extract these variables, so what can I do? I will just select these variables. Let's say if I have to extract these 5 or 6 rows. So I'll just select it and then preview and export extracted data. So this will, alright, so this is how it is right now. So if you see, this is how it is extracted. Maybe I use a different version. Choose alternate extraction method. Maybe I can use stream or I can use lattice, and you can read more about what it means. So let me use lattice here, and you see that now the format is so consistent. So, and then what we will do is we will just export this. So this will then download a CSV file for us. So very easy to use. You don't have to write any code or do anything, but very useful. And a very similar tool is Camelot, which also does the same thing. And I think so. There are resources where so there's a video here where you can learn how to use Tabula step by step. And then there's also Excalibur, which is powered or which is built on top of Camelot. Just Excalibur is a web interface, and Camelot is basically a bunch of APIs that you can use to convert PDF to CSV files or extract data out of PDF files. Alright. So another important format or source of data is the web. So we have discussed CSV and PDF files, but what about dataset collecting data from the web? So I think all of us have heard about web scraping. So let's say I have a Wikipedia page with let's say a GDP of all the states, and if I have to extract that, so I will have to download that information somewhere. That is what we mean by web scraping. And so let's see, so first why it is needed, because a lot of information is there on the web which is not available as CSV files or as PDF files. So that is why you need to scrape data from the web. And a good point is all information is in a human readable format, because the internet is made for humans, at least till now it is. So you can extract this data because it is readable. The problem can be that though the information is available, a lot of times it is unstructured. So that we will have to deal with. But still, it's first step is extracting, then maybe processing. So what are some of the use cases? So obviously one is collecting data from websites like Wikipedia, because it has a lot of information. Collecting data from code websites, building time series datasets from dashboards which are updated on a periodic basis. So a lot of times, especially with government data, raw data is not available, but dashboards are available. And let's say if I have to extract or scrape data out of that dashboard to, so let's say if I have to do some analysis or visualize a data set which is not part of the dashboard. So then I have to extract data out of the dashboard, so which is a very common use case. So basically collecting data from government dashboards and websites. But then, is it ethical? It depends on the source. Where are you scraping from? What are you scraping? So there is no general definition whether it is ethical or not. But then there are some rules you can follow. Now, what are these rules? A very important one is you should every website, or maybe most websites, have this file which is called the robots.txt file, which is used by crawlers, search crawlers. So then there are certain rules written here, like what are some of the pages the crawlers can crawl, what are some of the pages the crawlers can't crawl. So if as humans we are scraping data from the web, the first step is to read the robots.txt file and see what are some of the pages that the creators of the website are allowing us to crawl. If we are doing that, then it is all ethical. Similarly, there is a sitemap which gives us the location of all the pages on the web. You should also see that. And another important point, analyze crawl delay. It should not happen that we are doing multiple requests, let's say 100 requests in 1 second, which can overburden the servers. So we should consider that, have some delay. So let's say, and that also depends. Maybe sometimes a lot of website publishers or developers, they explicitly define this crawl delay. But even if it's not explicitly defined, think about the kind of traffic that goes on the website, and then build your crawlers. Very important, check the terms of service and terms and conditions before scraping. Otherwise, you are yourself to blame. Contact the site owner if you plan on doing a large amount of scraping, because a lot of times website developers, or maybe even if data is coming from the government website, and if you need a lot of data, then instead of scraping, maybe you can try reaching out to the creators and see if some amount of data sharing is possible. So these are some of the rules, and then also there's a link, ethics in web scraping, which are more general rules for both the scraper and the site owner. So as long as it is made explicit, it helps both parties. It should not come as a surprise, basically. Alright, so then nowadays a lot of us work on Google Sheets, which is different from Excel, a Google version of Excel. And then there are some important formulas here which we can use to scrape data from the web, because usually when we talk about web scraping, it means that we might have to write some code, we might have to write some script to scrape data from the web, but nowadays it's very easy to scrape data from the web, and we'll look at a few examples. So let me first open this dataset, which is on the Justice Hub. So there's a website, Indian Qanun, which downloads all judgments and from all the high courts and the Supreme Courts. And they have contributed this data set on the Justice Hub, which is the top 1,000 most cited acts and sections across courts. So let's say if I have to download this data, now one way of downloading it is I can go on the Justice Hub and I can download this data. But then I will have to again open it in a CSV file. Now, what about if I have to skip all these steps? So what I can do is probably I can just open a new sheet. So you open a new Google Sheet, and what you do is the formula is here. Just copy this. I'm just copying this formula. So how the formula is, the first is the URL of the website or the data that you have. In our case, that URL is so if I go on the Justice Hub, I right click on download, I copy the link address. So this is the URL. Then I go here, I use this formula which is import data. I copy the URL here. The delimiter is a comma because it's a CSV file, and I just press enter. So this will So I'll skip all these steps and I will have all the data if it works, and see if the data is all here. So especially with platforms that are open data platforms, you get all the public links, the CSV links are available, and you can use this formula to directly download the dataset. Alright, what is the next formula? Any questions? Alright. Import XML. So import XML, basically what it does is, so let me first open the website. So in the first example, the data was available directly as a table. Alright, so this is a CSV file which is available. But in this example, so this is a list of all, or maybe not all, some of the judges of the Madras High Court. Now this is what we mean by unstructured data in a way, because I can't see any structure to this. Maybe if I look at the HTML file, I will see some structure. But let's say if I have to download the details of all these judges without probably writing any code or anything like that. So this is possible. What you have to do is, you first, again let us first see what the formula is. So formula is called import XML. So import XML, first argument is the URL, second is the XPath query. Now what is XPath? So if I go here, if I right click and choose inspect, now every component in a web page has an address. So XPath is sort of an address. Now how do you get that address? So you click on inspect. Let's say if I want a photo of the Chief Justice, so I click here, I right click here and go to copy and copy XPath. I think I'm using Chrome, but this is available across all browsers. So when I have the XPath, I can just see by copy pasting it, this is how the XPath looks. Alright, so for this particular example, we have already captured the XPath. So let me just copy this entire formula and see what information we get when we paste this in the Google Sheet. I'm creating a new sheet. Alright, so pasted the formula, and this is the kind of information that we have. So we have the name of the judge and we have the profile details, and we can probably download their photos as well if we have the XPath with us. So again, a very simple way of downloading data from the web. The third one, which is import HTML. So let's see what this means. So opening a Wikipedia page. So here is a list of all the states and union territories of India by crime rate. Alright, so you have the states and you have these variables. Now this is somewhat structured, and let's say if I have to download this data, so what can I do? A lot of times what people do is people take a screenshot and then somehow use it in as PDFs, but that is not needed. What you can do is, in going back to the formula, so it's import HTML, first is URL, second is query, third is index, and fourth is local. Alright. So let me just copy the URL first. This is the URL of the page. Going here, creating a new sheet. So import HTML, first is the URL. What is a query? Query is a table, because we just need a table from this page, and this in. Okay, sorry. Alright, so I'll just do it again. So the formula is import HTML, copy paste the URL, and since I need a table, so the query is a table, and then index. Index means the location of the table. So if there are multiple tables on this page, then what is the location of this table? I think in this case it will be 1, but let us check. And the last one is local, which you can skip. So if I just press enter, Yes, so I have something, this is not the entire table though. So maybe I need to use a different index. So let's see 2. What is there on the second index? Maybe this is also not the table. So let us use 3. Yes, so this is the table. So now what you have is exactly what you see on the Wikipedia page. This is how it looks, and this is the final data that you get with just one formula. And then you can just copy paste this, download it as a CSV file or whatever you want. So again, a very useful formula. And the last one is import feed. Now, what do we mean by a feed? A feed is generally let's say if you are following a blog or if you are writing a blog, you usually the creators maintain a feed which can be read across multiple platforms. Let's say you are writing on WordPress, but someone does not want to read your blog on WordPress, but let's say on some other software that they are using. So what you can do is instead, so you can obviously publish on WordPress, and then you can also have a feed, and then they can use this feed and import your feed on the software that they are using, so that they are not dependent on WordPress or anything like that. So that is what we mean by a feed. So I am opening one website here, so just to see how the feed looks. So this is how the feed looks. So this is a list of all the blogs that this organization has written. So currently I can't understand anything from this, but let's say if I have to just get a list of all the blogs that have been written by them. So again, there's a formula for that, but this will only work wherever you have a feed. If you don't have a feed, then this will not work. The formula is same: import feed, URL, query, headers, and number of items. So I'm just pasting it here. So yeah, so now you get a list in a structured format. So from this code, what we end up with is a table where we have the title, the author of the blog, the URL, the date created, and the summary. You can use this formula on most websites because most websites have a feed. And yeah, this is how you convert unstructured data to a structured data set. Alright. I think moving on. Yes, so public data is very messy, but then there are a few guides that people have written which we can use, and all of these are available online. So a lot of what we have discussed, especially whenever you are dealing with public data and you face these issues, you can follow these guides and see what the solution is and what you can do. So let's say data are in a PDF. So if you open this, so it will tell you what all you can do. And some of this we have already discussed, but then there are a lot of other use cases that you can follow this guide, and this will really help you when you are working with public data. Alright. So that was it. Any questions? Gaurav, would you like to? Any questions from anyone? The slides are available at this link, and you can download it, explore it. Also, all the data sets that we have seen here are available on GitHub at the same link.
Like to see if anyone is keen on trying this with the data they are working on. If they would like to nominate a data set on which we can try out something together. Any data source, any data set which you have been lately struggling with, which you would like to work on with. Can we try with NCRB data sets? Maybe some of them are available on data.gov.in.
Yeah, they are already available.
Yeah. Do you want to bring them here on the sheet?
NCRB?
Yeah.
From data.gov.in maybe, yes, we can.
So NCRB is National Crime Bureau Statistics, so Crime Record Bureau Statistics. So they publish almost on a yearly basis a detailed report on the crimes at national level, state level, across different sections and acts.
So we can use any other data set as well, but yeah, crime is here. So crime in India 2020. Let's say, alright, this looks good. Court disposal of IPC crimes in metropolitan cities during 2020. NCRP. This is directly getting downloaded. Nash, is there one with some API that you? Okay. Yeah. I just need a CSV URL for this.
That one, I think
Good.
once you log in.
Yeah, then okay. Any other data set that we get?
External link also. This data directly relating to the NCRB ID.
This one, yeah, this one. Yeah, this is a report. Yeah. These are mostly PDF files. Oh, there is an Excel file here. These are Excel files. OBI we can try. Open Budgets India we can try. So let's say we are using Open Budgets India and we, let's say if I want to...
Maybe you can search in the search bar itself. Maybe like go for Union Budget. And go for Union Budget at a glance. And maybe outlay on major schemes. This is the recent data we have. No, on the top. First one. This is slightly 1 year before.
Yeah.
On the top. This is download or get a link.
Probably it should work. So import data, write a URL, delimited in a comma. Let's see what we have here. Yes, we get the data here. So this works. I think OBI, everything should work.
Right. So without any login, anything, you can just take the data set, import it, and start working on Excel, create your visualizations, etc.
Yeah.
So we can use the remaining part of the discussion to understand what kind of data sets about Assam you would like to see in open. We already have worked on getting the budget data, the contract data, the other data sets related to crime, justice, in public domain in Assam, but we would like to understand from you folks what kind of data about Assam you would like to publish in open. Any data sets which would be of interest for you?
Interrelation of land revenue data with GIS data, so that we know where on earth that particular land is there, so that is a separate data.
Right.
And then the map is separate. How do we stitch these two data sets together?
So land records in a geospatial format.
Yes.
So that you can get all that information in one place.
Yes. So which are the flood prone areas? So
Right.
it's there, the flood prone area map is there, but interrelating it with who does the land belongs to. So we can map vulnerability.
Right. Mapping vulnerability and mapping, the socioeconomic growth would be much more easier.
Yes.
If you have that data. Definitely. We haven't seen any other state doing that. There is one study done by NCAER to understand the extent of digitization of land records across states. I think Assam is also one of the states they have studied.
Yes.
But as far as we understand, Assam doesn't release that data in public domain. But we would definitely check with the land revenue department and see if we can target that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Any other data set which you would like to see in public domain or in some form or the other coming in open that might help your research, your use cases in Assam?
I think some of the northeastern states are very advanced in having an online system for PDFs. Something that would be interesting to see is to have a look at that data, especially now that POS, Aadhaar-based e-POS is mandatory in most states to access the entitlement of rice or whatever. And there are instances where e-POS fails because of mobile connectivity issues or anything.
Right.
So that access data, how much has been allocated through e-POS, how much is through manual. So I think that level of data, when is consumption higher for households?
Right.
So I think that would be interesting to see if we can correlate it with the consumer expenditure survey and see how ration PDS uptake is related to maybe the lean season in agriculture or things like that. That might be an interesting data set to see.
Especially for Assam's economy, which is much more agrarian in nature. It would be interesting to see how the PDS timelines work and how the produce and other information works. Siddhanshu, there is one such data set which we are trying to work with, the Mandi related information. Do you want to briefly talk about it?
Mandi price is a data set by Ministry of Agriculture. So what they have done, they have digitized across the country. There are lots of mandis, those were digitized. And every day they used to keep a track of all the materials reached to that mandi to buy or sell. So they keep on tracking that data, and they put the commodities, their price, regular price, and they track it through a chain of multiple mandis. So that data is available with us and with an open API, and that get updated multiple times in a day, around in every 4 hours. So again, it depends upon the connectivity at that respective mandi, but however, consolidated, updated, done by end of the day. So that by end of the day, if you watch that, you can check that out, like what is the consolidated data for the day. And many of the commodity portal are using that data. Specifically, we know a couple of banks and commodity market, they keep on tracking that data. And even I know a couple of startups in Bangalore and other those who are already in the agriculture sector. They have consumed that data, and they have aggregated those data along with other data sets. Like they have all this archival data of that particular data set for the last 2-3 years. Now they can suggest a farmer what would be a good time to sell your paddy or sell your other grains, and what would be the nearest mandi. So now they are connecting it with a free calculator also. So let's say with your geolocation of a particular farmer, so they can calculate the freight from that particular point to the mandi, and what would be the nearest mandi, what would be the freight, and what would be your end of the day, what would be your final gain of that by selling that product. So that kind of calculator would also very good in terms of rural, small and marginal farmers. And even now they are planning. I think that app is available in Kannada also. So if that could be available in other languages and that could be rolled out in other areas also, I think that would be a real help. APEDA and other organizations, those who are already in these kind of agriculture related commodities activity or commodity exchanges, they could use that data.
And are you aware about the coverage for Assam?
We can filter out that also, not an issue, because whatever mandis are there, they are already digitized.
So this is also coming from ENAM, the ENAM service,
yes,
right?
ENAM service. Yes.
So maybe what would be possible is learn from ENAM service and create similar like a EPDS service where this kind of data set could be leveraged.
EPDS is already available. I just checked with Assam also. I think they have a centralized portal. Just give me a second. I'm just trying to figure out. Because in the central platform, there is a central software made by NIC long back. So in that, they are tracking all the, and now this EPO is also connected with that central software, so that everything could be tracked. That is from, they have all this GPS system in the vehicles also, the vehicle that carries all this PDS material
storage.
Yeah, from the warehouse to the village level or to the next level or to the dealer, all these things were tracked actually. So even they had a case study long back where they search who could be the shortest route, where they can save lots of fuel on that, and all these price could be reduced, so that that could be a more robust system, and data driven decision making could be easier. So even they can check all the selling back get selling through. Let's say in many cases it was found that in many times the vehicle were not using the proper route, and they can sold some material in the route or something like that. So those things could also be tracked through this system. So I'll just try to figure out if that data is available, and I'll definitely share that.
That would be really helpful, Sudhanshu. Any other data set which
all consumption in the energy sector, so that we can help the transition of non-renewable to renewable sectors.
especially with focus on climate
Energy
crisis and
yes.
clean energy, trying to understand how much non-renewable and renewable energy power consumption is there in Assam at a grid level or below grid level also, wherever.
Yeah, hi. As I work for a medical department, so I just want to ask: is there any data related to any patient's information, like this much percentage of patients are suffering from these diseases? So, is there any data regarding this for Assam? Whether some are suffering from any cardiac diseases, so this much percentage of Assam's people are suffering from cardiac diseases or any other diseases that are for rheumatology, so is there any data so that we can use it and look for it?
NFHS survey 5 might have some information on cardiac diseases. I'm not sure.
Actually, I'm not only talking about the cardiac diseases, about every diseases, like how much percentage and how much age percentage of people in Assam are suffering from these diseases. Like how much percentage of females are suffering from these diseases. So if we can get that type of data, so I think it will be much more beneficial for us. And also, as in Northeast Assam and Guwahati is Rajasthan for all medical centers. So so if we can get that kind of data, then it will be much more helpful and beneficial for us.
Definitely. So 2-3 sources which come to my mind, which we can check for sure. NFHS 5 is something we can definitely check. An FHS 5 survey would have some of these information. HMIS data gets regularly updated on data.gov.in, so you can check what kind of data is coming for.
Data I have checked was regarding sex and age ratios. Then most of the data from NHM and Family Welfare Association that I have downloaded and checked it. So it was regarding only the age, wise, and sex ratios, and I have not found any kind of information that relates to patients or the diseases and the problems they face in the medical sector.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's this report I just found. It's called the India State Level Disease Burden Initiative. The latest one is available from 2017 or 2018, and this was the research was done by ICMR, Public Health Foundation of India, Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation, and other experts. So this should give you some, at least for a few diseases, like what is a burden at a state level. So though this is the 2017 report, but yeah, we can check the kind of data sets that are available. This is at a state level. I'm not sure what is the till where you can go, like to a district level or maybe just at a state level. But yeah.
Why not we also check the HMIS data available on data.gov.in?
I'm just sending you the filter version for Assam.
So I think HMIS data on data.gov.in.
It's there. I have just put a filter and just type data.gov.in / state underscore UTs / Assam. State underscore UTES / Assam. Just scroll it down. So these are all latest HMI data from 2021, and these are again district wise.
So here you would find district level health indicators, sub-district level also some reports are available which you can explore. So I think
you can directly download. Just click on the CSV.
So you have data on acute cardiac emergencies happened at a district level. Month-wise data. Yeah. So all the districts, like something. So maybe this is something which you can use on data.gov.in.
This data is contributed through a web service actually, so it got updated every month automatically.
So every month you can get an updated data set for your research purpose. Anyone else? Any other?
Just want to add to that discussion. Again, to my current understanding, there are a list of diseases under the communicable diseases that has to be reported by the states. But the other non-communicable diseases, I'm not sure if there's a reporting mechanism to get an aggregator who's suffering from.
Some of them are there.
Yeah. So it is a long way ahead to get that data on a real-time basis. But yeah, that's the status as of now.
So at least we have met NHM director of Assam, and he's quite proactive in terms of sharing data, in terms of using data to form data-driven decision making in Assam. So if such requests of these data sets are coming in, we can probably have one stakeholder consultation with the NHSM Assam director. He couldn't join us for this event because he was traveling, but we can do a follow-up stakeholder discussion with him, and I'm sure he would be quite open to sharing some of this information in public domain. Anything else which you would like to discuss with us? Otherwise, we can wrap up. Thanks, everyone.